It was a Wednesday evening when my sister's email landed in my inbox. I'm Imelda Bennett, 33, a marketing manager who thought I'd seen it all until that night. The subject line read in bold wedding registry. I opened it expecting something sweet. Instead, I was stunned by what I saw. A brand new Tesla, a $15,000 vacation fund, and a diamond ring that could blind you. My jaw dropped. I had already poured my heart and savings into her wedding, and this was her response. I fired back a text. No way. Her reply came instantly dripping with venom. Then don't come. So I didn't. And when the wedding day arrived, it didn't unfold like the dazzling fairy tale she had bragged about for months. What happened that day left the entire family shaken a moment no one could have predicted. She thought she could bully me into being her personal bank, but I had finally drawn the line. Later, she took to Instagram, blasting me publicly as selfish and jealous of her happiness. Her words stung, but they also lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to stay silent any longer. From that moment, secrets began to spill, tearing apart the perfect image she had tried so hard to build. What would you have done if you were in my place? Drop your answer below. I might feature some of your comments in my next story. Ava had always been the center of attention in our family. Growing up in our parents' charming house in Providence, Rhode Island, my sister knew how to work a room. She'd bat her eyes, flash a smile, and get whatever she wanted. I learned early on that saying no to her was like trying to stop a freight train. It started small, her begging me to cover a concert ticket when we were teens, promising she'd pay me back. She never did. By the time she was 26, those requests had ballooned into demands for designer dresses, limited edition sneakers, and once a pair of high-end wireless headphones that cost more than my monthly car payment. Our parents, Gary and Shirley, didn't help. Dad would chuckle at her antics, calling her spirited, while Mom would swoon over her charm, handing over credit cards like they were candy. Their house, with its cozy backyard and historic brick exterior, was Ava's stage. She'd throw tantrums if she didn't get her way, and they'd cave every time. I remember one Christmas when she insisted on a $500 handbag. I was saving for my first apartment, but Mom and Dad scraped together the cash, saying she's just passionate. Passionate, try, relentless. Meanwhile, I was the one they leaned on for practical things, helping with bills, fixing their computer, even planning family dinners. I was the responsible one, but to Ava, I was just a resource. Her best friend, Luna, was no better. They'd been inseparable since high school, always scheming. Luna would egg her on, whispering ideas like some devil on her shoulder. Once, when Ava wanted a new phone, Luna suggested she borrow my credit card because I wouldn't mind. I did mind, and I shut that down fast. But Luna's influence grew stronger over the years. She'd hype Ava up, telling her she deserved the best, no matter the cost. I overheard them at a family barbecue giggling about how Ava could get anything from me because of my job. My marketing career paid well, sure, but it wasn't a free pass for her whims. I'd worked nights and weekends to climb the ladder, not to bankroll her lifestyle. Ava's demands weren't just about money. They were personal. She'd call me late at night asking for cash to cover a last-minute trip with Luna, then act like I owed her when I hesitated. If I refused, she'd pout, saying I didn't care about her happiness. It stung, but I started to see the pattern. To her, I wasn't a sister. I was a walking wallet. One summer, she crashed my car during a joyride and never apologized. Instead, she asked me to pay for her rental while it was in the shop. When I said no, she stormed off, and Mom took her side, saying I should be more understanding. Understanding, I was exhausted. The worst part was how they all normalized it. Dad would shrug, saying, "That's just Ava." Mom would lecture me about family loyalty, as if I was the one letting them down. Even at family gatherings, Ava would dominate the conversation, flaunting her latest purchases, while I sat quietly, knowing I'd probably paid for half of them indirectly. Luna would chime in, praising Ava's confidence as if I was invisible. I tried talking to Mom and Dad about it once, pointing out how Ava never took responsibility. They brushed it off, saying she'd grow out of it, but she didn't. If anything, her entitlement grew with her. Looking back, I should have seen the wedding fiasco coming. Ava had spent years perfecting her act, charming, demanding, and never satisfied. Luna was always there, cheering her on, pushing her to ask for more. My parents enabled it blind to how they'd created a monster. And me, I was the one caught in the middle, expected to keep the peace, while Ava treated me like her personal bank. I'd had enough, but I didn't know how far she'd take it, or how her actions would tear our family apart. I'd spent months planning Ava's wedding, pouring $15,000 into the venue, catering, and decorations to make her day perfect. My savings took a hit, but I thought it was worth it for family until her wedding registry landed in my inbox. I opened it, expecting a modest list. Instead, I found demands for a brand new Tesla, a $15,000 honeymoon fund, and a diamond ring that screamed excess. My stomach churned. I'd already bankrolled her entire wedding, and now she wanted more. It wasn't gratitude, it was greed. I grabbed my phone and texted Ava, "This is too much. I can't do it." Her response was instant, dripping with venom. "If you can't support my happiness, don't bother showing up." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. She was banning me from the wedding I'd paid for. I typed back, "You're serious?" Her reply was a single word, "Dead." I put my phone down, hands shaking. Years of bending over backward for her, and this was my reward, a slap in the face. Later that evening, my Aunt Diane sent me a text. She'd overheard Ava bragging to a cousin about how I'd cover everything else for the wedding: imported flowers, a celebrity band, even a custom gown. Diane warned me Ava had been counting on my wallet to fund her dream day, no matter the cost. I felt like a fool. I'd thought my sacrifice would bring us closer, but Ava saw it as an open checkbook. Her entitlement wasn't new, but this was next-level manipulation. I couldn't sleep that night replaying every time I'd given in to her demands. The concert tickets, the designer shoes, the endless loans she never repaid. None of it was enough. Now she'd crossed a line expecting me to finance her fantasy while dismissing my efforts. I scrolled through my phone, dreading what I'd find. Sure enough, Ava had taken to Instagram, posting a cryptic story with a photo of her engagement ring and the caption, "Some people are too jealous to celebrate love." The comments piled up, her friends led by Luna chiming in with heart emojis and shade. "Don't let haters ruin your day," one wrote. It didn't take a genius to know who the hater was. I wanted to fire back to expose her for what she was, but I held off. Confronting her online would only fuel her narrative. Instead, I started piecing together a plan. Ava thought she could guilt me into compliance, but I was done playing her game. Her wedding was her stage, and she'd cast me as the villain. Fine. If she wanted a showdown, I'd give her one, but not on her terms. I'd spent too long letting her walk all over me, and this registry was the final straw. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. She'd underestimated me, and that was her mistake. That evening, Ava's engagement party began at my parents' house in Providence, filled with laughter and anticipation. I walked in, my pulse racing, determined to confront Ava. After her outrageous registry demands and that venomous Instagram post, I wasn't going to let her paint me as the villain anymore. The living room was packed with relatives and friends, all buzzing around Ava as she flaunted her sparkling ring. Luna hovered nearby, whispering in her ear, probably plotting her next move. I clutched my phone, the screenshot of her registry. Tesla $15,000, honeymoon fund, diamond ring, burning a hole in my pocket. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, and Ava had none for me. As the toast began, I saw my chance. I stood up, glass in hand, and cleared my throat. The room fell silent, eyes on me. "I want to congratulate my sister. I started my voice steady, but I also need to clear something up." I pulled out my phone and read aloud her registry demands, each one landing like a bombshell. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I didn't stop there. I described her Instagram story, how she'd called me jealous for refusing to fund her fantasy. "I've already paid $15,000 for her wedding," I said, locking eyes with Ava, "and this is how she thanks me." Ava's face turned crimson. She stammered, "You're twisting everything. I never asked you to pay for the whole wedding." Luna nodded vigorously, backing her up, but the room wasn't buying it. Mom jumped in, her voice sharp. "You're being overly sensitive," she snapped. "Ava's just excited about her big day." Her words stung, but I'd expected it. Mom always had a blind spot for Ava. Dad, though, looked uneasy. He sat down his drink and turned to Ava. "Is this true?" he asked, his tone low but firm. "Did you expect your sister to cover all that?" Ava fidgeted, her charm crumbling. I just thought she'd want to help, she mumbled, glancing at Luna for support. Luna shrugged, suddenly quiet. I seized the moment. Help, I said, my voice rising. I paid for the venue, the catering, the decorations, and you still demanded a car and a vacation. Then trashed me online. I listed her past requests, things I hadn't mentioned before, like the time she begged for a designer watch and never wore it. The relatives exchanged glances, murmuring. Even Mom looked shaken, though she didn't back down. Dad pressed Ava further. Explain yourself. He said, his patience thinning. She tried to spin it, claiming she only wanted suggestions for gifts, but it sounded hollow. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tide turning. I could see Luna whispering to another guest, probably trying to salvage Ava's image. But it was too late. The truth was out, and it wasn't pretty. I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. For years, I'd swallowed my frustration to keep the peace. But no more. Ava had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story. As the party wound down, I made a decision. I'd poured my heart and savings into Ava's wedding, only to be met with greed and betrayal. Enough was enough. The next morning, I called the wedding planner and canceled my payments for the catering, the band, and the floral arrangements. I emailed the vendors directly, explaining I could no longer cover the costs. It wasn't easy. Each call felt like a gut punch, but I couldn't keep enabling her. Ava thought she could guilt me into submission, but she'd miscalculated. I wasn't just withdrawing money, I was drawing a line. By the time I hung up the last call, my hands were steady. I'd spent years being the good sister, always giving, always compromising. But Ava's demands had pushed me too far. Mom's defense of her and Dad's hesitation at all showed me how deep this dysfunction ran. I wasn't just fighting Ava. I was challenging the whole system that let her get away with it. The wedding was weeks away, and I knew my decision would shake things up. I didn't care. Ava wanted to play the victim, but I was done playing along. She'd have to face the consequences, and I was ready to watch it unfold. As the wedding day approached, Ava's plans began to crumble. I wasn't there. Her band had seen to that, but the reports came flooding in from relatives and mutual friends. The venue, a grand hall in Providence, stood half empty, its elegance mocked by the absence of essentials. Tables sat bare without a single plate of food. The caterers had walked away when the final payment never arrived. The stage meant for a live band was silent, its speakers gathering dust after the musicians canceled, and what was supposed to be a cascade of roses was reduced to a cheap bouquet Ava had scrambled to buy from a corner store. Guests shuffled in, their excitement fading into confusion. Ava, in her glittering gown, tried to hold court, but her smile cracked as people whispered. Some left early, muttering about the budget wedding that wasn't. One aunt later told me Ava snapped at a server who couldn't offer so much as a glass of champagne. Another guest overheard her blaming the vendors, claiming they'd screwed up her big day. But the truth hung heavy. Without my funding, her dream wedding had collapsed into a hollow shell. Dad called me that night, his voice thick with frustration. He'd watched Ava unravel as the day fell apart. She leaned too hard on you, he said, no trace of his usual leniency. He'd pulled her aside after the last guest slipped out, confronting her in the empty hall. You expected your sister to carry this whole thing, he told her, his tone sharp. You took her for granted, and now look at this mess. Ava tried to dodge, insisting I'd ruined her wedding out of spite, but Dad cut her off. You pushed her too far, he said. This is on you. For once, she had no comeback. Her usual charm was useless against his blunt honesty. A few days later, Ava tried to salvage her image. She gathered her friends at a chic cafe in Providence, ready to spin the disaster in her favor. My cousin Natalie was there and filled me in. Ava sat at the center, her voice dripping with indignation, claiming I'd abandoned her at the last minute. She promised to handle everything, then bailed, Ava said, painting me as the jealous sister who couldn't stand her happiness. Luna, ever her cheerleader, chimed in, urging the group to see my betrayal. The friends nodded at first, sipping their drinks, ready to rally behind her. But Natalie had enough. She stood up, her gaze steady, and called Ava out. You're not telling the whole story, she said, pulling out her phone. She showed the group messages from our family chat where Ava had boasted about expecting me to fund an extravagant wedding, imported flowers, a top-tier band, even a custom cake. She knew Imelda was covering most of it, Natalie said, and still demanded a car and a vacation. The group froze. Natalie didn't stop there. She revealed how Ava had exaggerated our family's contributions, claiming Mom and Dad were pitching in thousands when they'd barely helped. You can't keep lying, Natalie told her. Luna tried to deflect, but Natalie was relentless. You pushed her to ask for more, she said, pointing at Luna. The air shifted. Friends who'd cheered Ava on now looked uncomfortable, their sympathy fading. By the end of the meeting, Ava's support crumbled. Some friends slipped out quietly, avoiding her eyes. Others stopped replying to her messages in the days that followed. Natalie told me one friend who'd hyped Ava's Instagram posts later apologized to her privately, admitting they'd been misled. Ava's attempt to vilify me had backfired. She doubled down, insisting she was the victim, but her friends saw through it. They weren't just disappointed, they were done. For years, Ava had coasted on charm, dodging accountability. But that day in the cafe, her lies caught up with her. Dad's words had shaken her, and Natalie's truth stripped her bare. The wedding's collapse wasn't just a bad day. It was the moment her facade cracked. I didn't celebrate, but I felt no guilt. Ava had built this, and now she had to face it. A week after the wedding disaster, Shirley showed up at my apartment. I was in my living room in downtown Providence, sorting through work emails when the doorbell buzzed. There she stood, her face tight with accusation, barely waiting to step inside before launching into me. You ruined Ava's wedding, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. How could you do that to your sister? I felt my chest tighten, but I wasn't surprised. Mom had always been Ava's biggest defender, blind to her faults, and now she was here to pin the blame on me. I gestured for her to sit, but she stayed standing, arms crossed. You need to hear me out, I said, keeping my tone even. I reminded her how I'd poured my savings into Ava's wedding, covering the venue, catering, and decorations, only for Ava to demand more, a car, a lavish trip, a diamond ring. I gave everything I could, I said, but she treated me like a bank, not a sister. Mom's eyes narrowed, but I didn't stop. I pointed out how she and Dad had indulged Ava for years, letting her skate by on charm while expecting me to clean up her messes. You enabled her, I said, my voice rising. Every time she wanted something, you handed it over, no questions asked. Mom bristled, her cheeks flushing. She just wanted a perfect wedding, she snapped. You could have helped her, but you chose to be selfish. Her words hit hard, but I saw them for what they were, deflection. She couldn't face the truth about Ava's greed or her own role in it. I took a breath and laid it out. A perfect wedding doesn't mean a Tesla, I said. You let her believe she deserved everything, no matter the cost, to anyone else. I recounted how Ava had crashed my car once and never apologized, how she demanded expensive gifts while offering nothing in return. You taught her that was okay, I said, locking eyes with her. Mom tried to interrupt, her voice shaking. You're twisting this, she said. Ava's young, she's passionate. You should have been there for her. But I wasn't backing down. I told her about the Instagram post where Ava called me jealous, how she'd lied to her friends to make me the villain. She didn't just want a wedding, I said. She wanted a spectacle, and you cheered her on. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in Mom's eyes, but it vanished quickly. She doubled down, insisting Ava deserved happiness, that I'd overreacted by pulling the funding. You humiliated her, she said, her voice cracking with anger. The argument grew heated, our voices echoing off the apartment walls. I told her how Ava had banned me from the wedding I'd paid for, how she'd spun lies at the cafe to save face. You're not seeing her for who she is, I said. You've always excused her, and now she thinks she can do no wrong. Mom shook her head, refusing to budge. You're supposed to be family, she shot back. Family doesn't abandon each other. I felt a pang, but I stood my ground. Family doesn't use each other, I countered. I'm done being her doormat. The air was thick with tension. Mom's face hardened, and she grabbed her purse. If that's how you feel, I don't know what to say, she said, her voice cold. She stormed toward the door, pausing only to throw one last jab. You've torn this family apart. The door slammed behind her, and I stood frozen, my heart pounding. I'd known confronting her would be hard, but I hadn't expected her to leave like that, so full of rage. Yet for the first time, I felt unburdened. I'd spoken my truth, and I wasn't going to carry their guilt anymore. Mom could cling to her excuses, but I was done pretending everything was fine. A few weeks after the wedding, the fallout kept spreading. Natalie called me one evening, her voice low but urgent. She'd stumbled across messages in our family group chat where Ava had vented her frustrations, calling Dad stingy for not covering her wedding costs. She said Gary refused to help because he's too cheap, Natalie told me, her tone laced with disbelief. She's been lying about everyone to make herself the victim. Natalie shared the screenshots with our cousins, and the truth rippled through the family. Ava's attempt to shift blame had backfired, exposing her dishonesty to those who'd once defended her. In Providence, Ava's reputation took a nosedive. After her failed attempt to rally her friends at the cafe, word spread fast in our tight-knit community. People whispered about her lies, her extravagant demands, and the disaster of her wedding day. Friends who'd once filled her Instagram with praise stopped inviting her to gatherings. One former ally who'd backed her online rants unfollowed her without a word. At a local charity event, I heard from a neighbor that Ava's name now drew eye rolls instead of sympathy. Her charm, once her greatest weapon, had lost its power. She'd burned too many bridges, and the community wasn't forgiving. To make matters worse, Ava was drowning in debt. The wedding, even stripped of my funding, had left her with a $10,000 bill for the venue and other deposits she'd signed for. With no savings and no one to bail her out, she took a part-time job as a server at a downtown diner. Natalie saw her there, carrying trays of coffee and wiping down tables, her face set in a scowl. "She's miserable," Natalie said, not hiding her satisfaction. "She keeps telling customers it's temporary, but she's stuck." Ava, who'd always flaunted her carefree lifestyle, was now tethered to a reality she couldn't escape. The irony wasn't lost on me. The biggest blow came from Hunter, Ava's fiancé. He'd stood by her through the wedding chaos, but the cracks were showing. Natalie overheard him at a family dinner, confiding in a cousin about his doubts. "I'm embarrassed," he admitted, his voice heavy. "Everyone's talking about her lies." Hunter had been blindsided by Ava's behavior, her demands, her manipulation, her refusal to take responsibility. He started pulling back, skipping their usual date nights and avoiding her calls. Natalie told me he was seriously considering calling off the engagement, unable to stomach the shame of being tied to someone who'd alienated so many. Ava's dream of a perfect life was slipping through her fingers, and this time no one was there to catch her. I didn't revel in Ava's downfall, but I felt a quiet relief. For years, I had carried the weight of her expectations, her lies, her entitlement. Now, the consequences were hers alone. Natalie's screenshots had laid bare her deceit, and the community's rejection had stripped away her facade. The diner job was a humbling dose of reality, and Hunter's doubts were a wake-up call she couldn't ignore. My sister had built a house of cards, and it had finally collapsed. I wasn't sure what came next for her, but I knew one thing. I was done picking up the pieces. Months passed, and the silence from my family was deafening. Ava and Mom hadn't reached out since the wedding fallout, and I'd made up my mind to keep it that way. Ava sent a half-hearted text, something about moving forward, but it felt hollow, more like a plea for forgiveness than an apology. I didn't respond. Mom left a voicemail, her tone softer than when she'd stormed out of my apartment, but still laced with excuses for Ava. I deleted it without replying. For years, I'd bent over backward to keep the peace, but their refusal to own up to the hurt they'd caused was the final straw. I was done. Dad tried to bridge the gap. He showed up at my place in Providence one Saturday, carrying a bag of my favorite pastries from a local bakery. "Can we talk?" he asked, his eyes tired but hopeful. Over coffee, he admitted he'd been wrong to let Ava's behavior slide for so long. "I thought she'd grow out of it," he said, shaking his head. "I didn't see how much it hurt you." His words meant something, but they came too late to fix what was broken. I told him I needed space, not just from Ava and Mom, but from the family's cycle of enabling. "I'm focusing on myself now," I said, my voice firm. Dad nodded, though I could see the weight of it settle on him. He left without pushing further, and I appreciated that. With the distance came clarity. I threw myself into my work, taking on new projects that filled my days with purpose. I started hiking on weekends, finding solace in the quiet trails outside Providence. My apartment became a sanctuary, no longer a place where I braced for the next family drama. I reconnected with old friends, ones who didn't expect me to carry their burdens. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself, not for someone else's demands. Setting boundaries wasn't easy. It came with guilt, with second guessing, but it was freeing. I wasn't just surviving, I was building a life I wanted. Looking back, I saw the lesson etched in every step of this mess. Ava's selfishness, her endless demands, had cost her more than a wedding. She'd lost friends, her reputation, and maybe even her engagement. Her need to take without giving back had pushed away the people who once cared about her. Mom's refusal to hold her accountable only deepened the damage, leaving them both isolated. I learned that enabling someone's greed doesn't help them. It hurts everyone. More importantly, I realized that protecting myself meant saying no, even when it felt harsh. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're self-respect. I wished I'd learned that sooner, but I was grateful to know it now. To everyone who's followed this story, thank you for sticking with me. It's been a journey, and sharing it has helped me process the chaos. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below and let me know. Your stories keep this conversation going, and I'm grateful for every one of you.